Joining us now is Seth Harris. He's the former acting labor secretary under President Obama. Mr. Harris, great to have you back. So you've read the federal guidelines that the White House put out yesterday, I'm sure. And so what do you think the most important step is to getting workers back into the workplace?
So, Alysin, if I were an employer who read the president's plan, I would feel like the federal government was hanging me out to dry and providing me with no support. And let me talk about three particular areas. There is nothing in the plan about the federal government helping with testing and contact tracing. The plan talks about employers keeping sick workers home, but we know that workers who show no symptoms can also transmit this disease to other people. So employers are sort of left with no way to protect against asymptomatic workers coming into the workplace and making everybody sick. The second thing is the plan doesn't include anything about the federal government helping to make sure that employers have all the personal protective equipment they need, the N95 respirators, masks, shields, gowns, gloves, the kinds of things that governors are having trouble getting. How are individual, particularly small employers, supposed to get them if the federal government hasn't deployed the Defense Production Act to get the industry focused on producing the things that are needed most? And then finally, employers are looking at the Occupational Safety and Health Administration and wondering, where is the specific guidance I need for my workplace? What specifically should I do? You need different protections in different workplaces. OSHA's given only very high-level guidance. And if you're a worker, OSHA has told you, we're not going to enforce the law. Except in the healthcare industry, or if somebody dies, we're not going to enforce the law. So I think that this plan is really seriously lacking. It lets governors make the decisions, but there is no meaningful federal role to help employers and workers.
So where does that leave workers who are desperate to get back to work?
Well, Alysin, what we know is that thousands and thousands of workers are contacting the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, complaining that COVID-19 is in their workplace. Maybe they have a sick worker. Maybe they have somebody who just has symptoms. Maybe they're just scared because they're afraid they're going to get sick. They're looking at places like the Smithfield pork processing plant in South Dakota, where more than 600 workers have gotten sick. They had to close the workplace down. But federal OSHA is not responding. We know that there are also almost certainly thousands more workers who are complaining to their state occupational safety and health agencies seeking help. I think workers are scared. I think employers are not getting the help that they need. And, when you talk about reopening the economy, that means getting people back to work, getting them back into the workplace. Well, if you can't do that safely, then our workplaces are going to turn into killing fields. And that's absolutely the worst possible outcome about reopening the economy.
I mean, the term killing fields is obviously chilling. That's what you think is going to happen when the doors open again and in the big places that you're talking about that don't yet have, any protective gear?
Well, if we don't do it right, that could happen. We're already seeing workers getting sick and dying in workplaces all around the country that are open right now. Grocery store workers, the United Food and Commercial Workers report that more than 3,000 of their members have already gotten sick in hospitals, on transit systems. So we have to do this right. I think we can slowly, carefully reopen the country, but we have to do it in a way that makes sense and that keeps workers safe. And the president simply washing his hands of any responsibility for anything in this crisis is not the way to get there. We need a coordinated federal state effort. We need the federal government to play the role that only the federal government can play with respect to workplace safety and health and producing the protective gear that we need. I'm really worried about it. And I think that the experience we've had so far is not encouraging.
I want to ask you about the unemployment numbers. 22 million people in just the past few weeks have lost their jobs and filed for unemployment. And, obviously, when we had the Great Recession in 2008, it took, 7 or 8 years for those jobs to come back. This is a different situation where we're always reminded that this was a voluntary shutdown of the economy. This was sort of self-imposed. But what about those 22 million? How many of those do you think are going to be able to get their jobs back, and how many are gone for good?
Well, that's a fantastic question, and I want to be humble about answering it because the truthful answer is we don't really know. We've never had an experience like this before. Let me just add to your numbers a little bit. 22 million have lost their jobs or have filed for unemployment claims in the last 4 weeks. There were already 7.1 million Americans who were unemployed even before we got those numbers, and I think that there are many millions more who have left the labor force or who are unemployed and just haven't gotten their unemployment claims filed yet. So I think the number is almost certainly higher. My expectation is that a sizable percentage of those people will be able to get back to work, but that's going to depend upon whether we can keep their businesses going, whether large businesses that were already deeply in debt end up going into bankruptcy, whether small businesses can survive. And that's going to require the Congress to get together and pass legislation that funds the loan programs that are available, provides money to state and local governments so they can provide the supports that are needed, provides money to hospitals so that they can do what they need to do to help keep people safe and hopefully recover. But so far, we're stuck in a political fight on Capitol Hill because there's a lot of intransigence about only funding the small business program. I think that that's a mistake. We're going to need a lot more money than has already been spent in order to keep businesses functioning so that workers have a workplace to go back to. So there's a lot of contingencies here to know whether or not we're going to get back to work quickly or if some of those workers are going to be out of work for a good long time.
I mean, obviously, even after they agree in Congress on the funding, then there's how to implement it. There's the process. You know, we had a representative on yesterday who represents the Bronx, which is, a very poor district. And he basically explained that there are barbershops, there are nail salons that have been there for years that are part, of the fabric of the community, but that will never come back because they're not being able to get the PPP or the small business loans.
Right. I share that concern completely. I'm worried that the money's going to hedge funders on Wall Street rather than going to the neighborhood pharmacy or to the local barbershop or hair salon, the folks who really are the core of the community. So I share that concern. And again, our employment picture is going to depend upon small businesses surviving. So far, the Small Business Administration has let out about 1.7 million loans. We have 30 million small businesses in the United States. We need to put out a lot more money. We need to get it out quickly. We need to have unemployment insurance going out quickly to every worker who should be eligible. We're hearing horrible stories about states like Florida that are being preposterously chintzy in denying workers their benefits. That is money that gets spent in small businesses, in grocery stores, goes to rent, goes to utilities. That's what keeps our businesses going, in addition to the loan programs that come from the government. Now is the time for government to open the spigot. Let's worry about the consequences later on, because the consequences, if we don't open the money spigot, is that we could end up with an economy that's in depression for a good long time.
Former Acting Labor Secretary Seth Harris, we really appreciate all of your expertise in this. Thank you.
Thanks, Alysin.